we're called Duckhorn Portfolio today, and that's the umbrella name for our 8 wineries. And we own 8 wineries, 7 in California and 1 in Washington State. And one of those 8 wineries is the original founding winery called Duckhorn Vineyard. And Duckhorn Vineyards, which was also founded in 1976 by Dan and Margaret Duckhorn. So, and their first vintage was 1978. So it was a perfect time for them to launch a winery. They weren't the first in Napa Valley, obviously. They were the 39th winery. But today there's over 400 wineries. So, exponential growth in wineries there. But they were there at a time when, as I say, Napa was taking off like that. They weren't actually winemakers before, and so that worked out well for them, actually. Dan, in the early 70s, was a vineyard consultant. So while he didn't make wine at the time, he knew about mapping varieties to certain terrain and terroir. And he was also very innovative, which led over the next kind of 20, 30 years to Duckhorn really blossoming in Napa and also outside of Napa as well. So, as I say, their first vintage was 1978. They made 900 cases of Merlot and 900 cases of Cabernet Sauvignon. And Dan would drive to San Francisco every Tuesday and Thursday with his car full of wine. And then he would drive back from San Francisco, dropping cases of wine at shops and restaurants and hotels. And he did that every Tuesday and Thursday. That's how it started. And you look at Duckhorn today with 8 wineries and well over 300 people, I think, working for the company. So, but similar to any winery, that's how it starts, with selling, hand selling bottles of wine to people, and that's how it started. Dan and Margaret started in 1976, and very much inspired by Bordeaux. Margaret Duckhorn particularly liked the styles of Bordeaux from the right bank in Bordeaux. So we're talking Pomerol, Saint-Emilion, those kind of finer tannin wines that were predominantly made from Merlot, perhaps Cabernet Franc as well. Very smooth tannins, silky, and more accessible. And I think the climate in Napa Valley particularly, it's that bit warmer than Sonoma next door, that makes it suitable for producing ripe, supple Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot that consistently ripen every year. You won't find a lot of Pinot Noir and white wines necessarily in Napa because it is quite warm. But they liked the right bank in Bordeaux, and they could make them in California, maybe with slightly more approachable. The history really starts with a very famous vineyard I wanted to mention called Three Palms Vineyard. You may have heard of it. It's a very famous vineyard in Napa Valley history, really. It's in northern Napa near St. Helena. And when Dan and Margaret made their first wine, their first Merlot, it came from grapes from that vineyard. So it was a Three Palms Merlot. That vineyard was planted in 1968. So today, as you can imagine, there are vines there that are over 50 years old. Extremely old vines. It's an old riverbed, so it's got a lot of complex soils in there. It takes a long time to harvest. Even though it's a very flat vineyard, it can take 6 weeks to harvest. And the reason for that is the variation in soils leads to different ripening timescales on the grapes. It's not all Merlot in the vineyard as well. It's about 50 acres, I would say, of the 83 acres is Merlot. You also have Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Syrah, Malbec, Petit Verdot. So quite a range of grape varieties. And the Duckhorn Vineyards was the first. We then launched another winery in Napa Valley called Paradox in 1994. And Paradox is unique. It's got a bit of a cheesy name, I have to say, but it's also unique in that it's the only winery in Napa to produce blends rather than varietals. So that's why it's a paradox. It's kind of a double meaning. It's got a pair of ducks on the label, but also it's a paradox. It's a contradiction because Napa focuses on pure varietal wines like Merlot, whereas Paradox focuses on blends. And its inspiration came from, the top kind of icon estates in Europe that focus on blends, like Sassicaia, Tiganello, Ornalea, Vega Sicilia in Spain as well. So that's where the inspiration came from. And it's focused on producing Napa Valley varieties or international varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, blended with local varieties like Zinfandel. And we kind of mess around every year with different things. You might see Grenache in there or Syrah in some of the wines. I had a white wine from them the other day, And it was really interesting. It was a Viognier, Chardonnay, Marsanne, Roussanne blend. So a classic Southern Rhone blend with the addition of Chardonnay. So it's apparently it's a fun winery to work in if you're the winemaker there, because you get a lot of flexibility. In '96, as I said earlier, we went outside California for the first time to set up our Pinot Noir winery in Anderson Valley called GoldenEye. Anderson Valley is the coolest, as in lowest temperature vineyard area in California, and it's particularly suitable for champagne varieties. Roederer, for example, have their headquarters up there. Because of the cooler temperatures, you'll find Germanic varieties up there as well, like Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Sylvaner, that kind of thing. So, and Pinot Noir is one of those delicate aromatic varieties as well. So Anderson Valley, perfect for that. Where do we go then? So we also produced a wine called Decoy. You may or not be familiar with Decoy. Decoy is kind of our second wine of Duckhorn, if you like. It's our volume wine. We do produce 8 different wines now, plus a sparkling wine which we launched this year. So the idea here is to produce very pure expressions of the varietals. So the Cabernet is very, very typical, Zinfandel, Merlot, and so forth. 100%, on the whole, 100% of that varietal as well. So we do a rosé as well. So we do Pinot Noir, Merlot, Cabernet, Zinfandel, rosé, Sauvignon, Chardonnay, and sparkling. And we do a wine what's called a red wine, or red blend. And that was the first Decoy wine to be produced. It's a blend of all of our varieties in our vineyards, including things like Tempranillo, Zinfandel, mainly Merlot and Cabernet. So that's Decoy. Where do we go? They launched Migration. I love the wines of Migration. They're just fabulous. The Migration it's got an unusual theme, Migration. It doesn't have a fixed appellation. We started off with Anderson Valley Migration in 2000. We then migrated in 2008, I think it was, to Russian River Valley. And then more recently, it's now Sonoma Coast. And the reason for that is we're always looking for top quality, cool climate fruit. And Russian River Valley is becoming increasingly hot with global warming, and increasingly harder to find that cool climate fruit. So that's why we've kind of moved out of the region a little bit to find other fruit in Sonoma Coast, which is higher elevation and cooled by the ocean breezes. Having said that, the Migration Pinot Noir today is still about 60% Russian River Valley fruit. We just can't call it Russian River. It's not as high as 85%. So if GoldenEye is our richest Pinot Noir, lots of barrel treatment, 18 months, very creamy. Some people who are more used to European Pinot Noirs like me struggle with that one. It's very Californian, it's very heavy, very high alcohol. On the other end of the spectrum is Calera, which is a winery we bought in 2017. Much more delicate, fragrant, aromatic, more acidity as well, more like those kind of Bourgogne Pinot Noirs. Migration sits in the middle of those. So to give you an idea stylistically, and actually the 2017 Sonoma Coast Pact won a great award last year. It was in the Pinot Noir Masters in Hong Kong. Out of 73 Pinot Noirs, that was the only one to win a trophy. So absolutely leading Pinot Noir, and you have the right vintage there with 17 as well. So fantastic wine, and I hope you enjoy that one. Other wineries, let's see. So in recent years, we've kind of got more into acquisitions. So 2012, we started a winery in Red Mountain in Washington State called Canvasback. And Red Mountain is becoming, really hot spot for producing top-end Cabernet Sauvignon. And as Tommy mentioned earlier, a lot cheaper than Napa Valley Cabernet as well, about half the price of our Duckhorn vineyards. But you get 17 hours of sunshine every day. It's almost 40 degrees during the day, very cold nights. So you have this huge variation between day and night temperature, which allows for a long, slow growing season. And Cabernet needs that to ripen properly and get all the flavors and the characteristics. It's not just about sugar and acidity. It's about developing the skins, the colors, the flavors, the weight of the grapes. And you need a long growing season for that. And Red Mountain is very reliable in that respect. We do produce small quantities up there of other grapes like Syrah. We do a little bit of rosé, a bit of Riesling. But our core wine up there is Canvasback Cabernet Sauvignon. It's definitely worth checking it out. It's quite a unique style of Cabernet. I really like it. And then our two Acosta brand, which is just an uber premium Pinot Noir producer, and a little bit of Chardonnay as well. They produce 26 or 27 different wines from different lots. And yeah, really fascinating winery, to be honest. Pinot Noir from all over California. Perhaps Pinot Noir will be the next big thing out of California as they start to, discover that certain sites and certain aspects are perfect for that variety. And I think it could be really exciting in years to come. Duckhorn was born out of its inspiration by Bordeaux. Actually, 5 of our 8 wineries focus on Pinot Noir. So, a lot of people say that the Duckhorn Portfolio offering of Pinot Noir is the best from the US than any other winery. Because, as I say, you've got Calera and Migration and Goldeneye and Decoy Pinot as well, which is really superb introduction to Pinot. So, quite a range of different Pinots from the Duckhorn Portfolio, even though our roots are firmly in Bordeaux.